A safe space where facts can be processed for results. Please like, dislike, subscribe. I do subscribe back, okay? Comment, share. I am grateful for your presence here on the block.
Social responsibility isn't a deep shift because it's a voluntary tactic, a reaction to a certain market at this point. And as the corporation reads the market differently, it can go back. One day you see Bambi, next day you see Godzilla.
Grand Rising, peace and love. I had no idea my microphone was on. Peace and love, peace and love, peace and love. Happy Friday. I love Fridays. Let me turn my mic down just a little bit. Not too sure how that's registering, but hopefully it's not too loud. Forgive me for this. So we are at Chapter 13 of the AB3121. I call it 492 pages of abuse. The United States and everyone else calls it the reparations report, which is kind of misleading, kind of diluting the actual insides of the document, but this is why I call it 492 pages of abuse, clearly stating what it actually is. So let's go ahead on to this page. Am I not sharing this? Hold on. I hope all is well. I hope we had a good weekend. My last weekend was crazy. Hopefully this one will be a lot better. So we've got the wealth gap, introduction, the contemporary racial wealth gap, historical causes of the racial wealth gap, drivers of the wealth gap today, effects of the wealth gap, and the conclusion. I want to say this is the shortest chapter in this whole document, which doesn't negate all of the other chapters. Since this is the last one, I will go over them. We went over the executive summary. Well, we didn't go over that. It is in audio in a playlist on my channel. Chapter 1 was the introduction. Chapter 2 was enslavement. Chapter 3 was racial terror. Chapter 4 political disenfranchisement. Chapter 5, housing segregation. Chapter 6, separate and unequal education. Chapter 7, racism in environment and infrastructure. Chapter 8, pathologizing black families. Chapter 9, we went over control over creative, cultural, and intellectual life. Chapter 10 was stolen labor and hindered opportunity. Oh, I see something. This should not be private. Hold on one second. I wanted it 18 and up, and I need to do that. The warning for this video as well. Chapter 12, Chapter 11, an unjust legal system. Chapter 12, mental and physical harm and neglect. We did that last week. And today we are going to the wealth gap. Chapter 13. So I will come back and give the warning. I don't think this one is as gruesome as the rest of the document, but for the sake of this document having a content warning, I will go ahead on and make sure that's given.
Contains discussions of racial discrimination, sexual assault, torture, lynching, and other forms of extreme violence. The report contains unedited historical quotations and photographs of white supremacist hatred, torture, lynching, autopsy, and other forms of graphic violence. Content warning: this report contains discussions of racial discrimination, sexual assault, torture, lynching, and other forms of extreme violence.
Okay. So we're getting ready to get back into this document. I'm going to turn this music down. It's not a birdie. And let me make sure the visibility on this is right. I don't know why it's showing private on my other screen. Again, happy Friday. I hope all is well in your world. I'm not gonna lie, I am tired. This week I was just super tired. I'm gonna get some rest this weekend and do some cleaning. I was cleaning collars yesterday and they kicked my butt. I'm not gonna lie, those collars were so big. Why is it saying private? Okay, I'm not understanding why that's private, but I'm just gonna move on and fix it at the end of the video. Thank you for joining us here on the block. Let me cut this music down just a little bit more because I do want to be able to think instead of hearing shakers in my brain. Okay, you know what we do here? We do the images. Is that gold? Or those are bricks? Burnt residences and businesses following the Tulsa Race Massacre, 1965. My mom was 3. And my brother was born in June. Wait, the massacre was June 21st, 1921. Is this meaning 2 years? June 1965 as well? Interesting. Something to look up. Getty Images. Okay, introduction. Wealth. What is wealth? Wealth is what you own minus what you owe. What you own minus what you owe. It is the key to economic security. It is what enables families. Forgive me, they gotta come down a whole lot more. It is what enables families to build a better future. Wealth functions in many ways. It provides economic stability during lean times. It opens doors to improving quality of life. Since that song went off, we're just going to change it. Okay. So it opens doors to improving the quality of life. It is a dam against the flood waters of economic catastrophes. It provides access to political power, and it also allows us to live and retire with dignity. And it's going to go into describing how wealth is passed down through generations, allowing children to live better lives than their parents and grandparents. So, throughout American history, forgive me, American history, government policies at all levels have helped white families collect these tools while preventing or undermining black families' ability to do the same. One second. Okay. I had to drink this some water. Okay, so we're going back to the wealth gap between black and white Americans is enormous and roughly the same today as it has been 2 years before the Civil Rights Act was passed in 1964. In 2019, the median black household had a net worth of $24,100, less than 13% of the median net worth of white households, which is at $188,200. This gap persists regardless of education levels and or family structures. You can go through these numbers in this document and like the studies that link to the endnotes are very revealing. Very revealing. I'm not going to go into the numbers. The trend is the same across social classes. In 2019, the median non-black working class household had a net worth of $114,270, while the median black professional managerial household had a net worth of $38,800. Unbelievable. Why is there a wealth gap? The wealth gap was roughly the same in 2016 as it was in 1962. The wealth gap is the result of the discrimination that African Americans experience, as described in every chapter of this document. The American government at the federal, state, and local levels, so repetitive in this document, they all intertwine together, has systematically prevented black communities from building, maintaining, and passing on wealth. These harms cascade over lifetimes and they compound over generations. And Section 2 discusses estimates of the contemporary racial wealth gap for the nation as a whole, for California by gender, and for descendants of Africans enslaved in the United States, whereas Section 3 describes historical causes of the racial wealth gap during enslavement and post enslavement, including, of course, racial terror, land theft, mass incarceration, and discrimination in government benefits, the labor market, and banking. Section 4 discusses the drivers of the contemporary wealth gap today, including unequal home ownership, fewer assets, and lower business ownerships. Section 5 discusses the harmful effects of the wealth gap. which has resulted in racial differences in the capacity of African Americans to transmit resources across generations. It's like you switch out wealth for trauma, lower financial resilience during crisis, and increased homelessness. The contemporary racial wealth gap. An asset is anything you own that adds value as opposed to a liability, which is money you owe. Examples of personal assets include a home or other properties, rental houses, commercial properties, checking or savings account, cars, financial and retirement accounts, gold, jewelry, coins, collectibles, and art, and life insurance policies. The wealth gap was roughly the same in 2016 as it was in 1962. 2 years before the Civil Rights Act, preliminary research suggests that despite rapid accumulation of wealth by African Americans in the decades after slavery and a narrowing of the racial wealth gap during World War II and the Civil Rights era, this progress halted by the mid 20th century, with the racial wealth gap widening over the last several decades. The Great Recession from 2005 to 2019, an interval that actually captures much of the impact of the Great Recession. Median household wealth, all assets minus all debts, among African Americans fell 53%, compared with a drop of 16% among white Americans. There's a lot of calculations in here. I think that would be more personal to someone doing their own numbers. I did mine and I was blown away. I compared, like, what I owe as opposed to what I make and as opposed to what I can make. It's just a ridiculous if I'm willing to put myself in that bracket, which I really am not. The wealth disparity cannot be explained by the lack of personal motivation and effort, family instability, or even a lack of education. For example, in 2019, black professional managerial households had a net worth of $38,800, while white professional households had a net worth of $276,000. Single white parents had more than two times the wealth at $35,000 of married black parents at $16,000. So a lot of people are like, why we can't stay married? A lot of times it has everything to do with income. Like almost everything. So in 2019, this is like a visual, 9 times more assets as opposed to black and white households. Some studies extrapolate California's racial wealth gap from national estimates. Direct California estimates of the wealth gap are only available for a single area, which is Los Angeles. So that's another thing about this document. It's giving you national, but it's giving it to you compressed. There's no way that they can even make California with all the localities in the state per report. There would be way more. There would be way more information, way more things that's probably not even in here, depending on the social structure of that particular locality. But this document is a place to start. It was for me. Gender specific issues, the wealth gap between black men and black women. No one likes talking about that, but it exists. It's small, and it functions differently than the wealth gap between white men and white women, which is much larger. So it's not like we're the only ones getting ragged on. There's a whole hierarchy between men and women, and then it's even broken down even further. Black men and women have similarly low wealth, although for slightly different reasons. Do not come for me. This is statistical. I'm just giving the stats. The wealth gap between white men and women is largely because white men have traditionally had access to jobs that provide retirement accounts and other benefits available to careers not available to women. I would love to see the end notes on these. This difference is access. This difference in access does not exist between black men and women. As African Americans of all genders historically have been excluded from these benefits due labor discrimination through, here's another typo, through labor discrimination as discussed in chapter 10. So the median wealth for a single black woman is $200, while the median wealth of a single black man is $300. Studies that show a greater wealth gap between black women and men do not appear to take into account incarcerated black men, which that number is huge, and that's in this report as well, who are deprived of their ability to build wealth for themselves and their family during a prison sentence. So, the numbers, I can see the numbers, but I don't really stand on the numbers because I do not expect them to be complete. I don't expect anyone who's done all of this to be completely honest, or even if they wanted to be honest. I don't believe that they could even be completely honest because I believe it's such a reckless act to be part in something like this. It's just so reckless. I don't believe you're writing down and documenting everything and being meticulous about it. 2015 median wealth for singles. So we've got the piggies. Yeah. So even white men and women have somewhat of a wealth disparity. There is no equality. That is not equal. So women catch it. This is why I did that short. People got mad at that short. Like, have you seen the wealth gap information? Why would I not? If I could be transracial, why would I not want to be able to identify for as a white man and go to work and make that much money? Like, you might not get my humor. It may be a little dry, but give me some room here. Like, seriously. Everybody should want to, we should all just start going and writing down white men. And we can get rich together, guys. I'm telling you, like, doesn't that make sense to you? Because it makes sense to me. But I'm a dreamer. So this is a visual of the incomes. And this is like a median. You know, you have to look that word up because I'm not gonna do it. But this is a good visual. Look at the pig, and this piggy should be smallest. So okay, because it's not even funny. I'm only laughing to get through it. You know, I don't want to get all emotional and crybaby about stuff 'cause, like I'm really not there. So you might see me laugh here or there. No, it's not funny, but to get through this, yes, I may use some dry humor. So the large wealth gap faced by single black women is particularly important because black women are more and increasingly likely to be single and breadwinners. I wonder if this has anything to do with that. Just wondering. All I have is my own experience. The marriage rate of Americans aged 25 to 54 has declined since the early 60s across all groups, but especially for black women, for women has halved to less than 40%. One third of black women aged 25 to 54 are single with children in the household, happily divorced here. I get so tired of being grouped in that box. Among black mothers, more than 80% are breadwinners compared to 50% of white mothers. At least half of unmarried black women have zero or negative assets. See, now this is what's his name? He died? Oh my God, I can't even think of his name. The guy that everybody was mad at, but the guys who wasn't mad at him, I can't think of his name. Oh my goodness. He just passed last year, I believe. Well, the guy was saying, you know, about the high value woman, the low value woman, the high value man, the low value man, etc. This is basically what he was saying in an abrasive. He was saying that he was basically explaining the cause and effect more, dealing with the effect of the wealth gap. Like I was listening to him and I was hearing him, but it was just his delivery. You know, most people want to know, well, what can I do? What you can do is know this information and try your best to counter it. If you know you've got three sons and three daughters, and say they're black, say they're white, teach your daughters about the wealth difference so that hopefully, and I'm just grasping at straws here because I'm just learning this information, maybe they can go into a field that isn't geared financially for them to fail. You know, most of our people want to go into nursing. Is that lucrative though? Or are you going to be capped at a certain amount of money because of who you are? Like you have to take all this information into account to make some better, different decisions. Or should you go into business and build your own practice? Will that be more lucrative for the community and yourself? I'm just thought like, you know, when you have certain information, it's it's supposed to change the way you go about things. Black men also face a stark wealth gap with white women and men. One study reports that in 2015, median net wealth for black men was 15% of the median net wealth for white men and 16% of the wealth of white women. While white men's median wealth was 28,900, black men black men's median was $300, about 1 cent on every dollar of a white man's wealth. That is like I can barely get it out. That's huge. There does not appear to be an extensive research on the wealth gap estimates for black LGBTQ populations. So I'm pretty sure that will be coming soon. Who child, this chapter here opened my eyes to a lot, especially having a daughter coming out of high school, you know, so that I'm really want her to make some good decisions considering what she has going on, which is a lot for a teenager. So according to the 2020 census, estimates based on immigration and migration patterns. I'm not going to get into that. I don't think there's any images in this last chapter. One study, The Color of Wealth in Los Angeles, included separate data for U.S. born African Americans and recent immigrants from Africa. National origin and race were both self reported in the study. On average, white Angelenos were far more likely to hold assets in stocks, mutual funds, investment trusts than both U.S. born and African black Angelenos. But African black Angelenos were likely to hold more assets than U.S. born black Angelenos. Okay, so you got African black Angelenos and you got U.S. born black Angelenos. It's so confusing. For example, 87% of African black Angelenos own liquid assets versus 62% of black Angelenos born in the United States. Such studies in other cities reflect comparable wealth gaps between U.S. born African Americans and immigrants, and it states recent immigrants. Historical causes of the racial wealth gap. I mean, I would say the whole doggone this whole document. You think it's horrible? I'm surprised they even admitted to this on paper. Like, what are those? Those are collars or tobacco. White homesteaders in El Monte, 1936, the federal government essentially gave away land for free to mostly white families through the Homestead Act. This picture was taken in 1936, but there were tons of Homestead Acts. That was one driver, and I won't like this is not in this document. That was a huge driver for passing. Yeah, that was a big driver for passing. No one, if it was able, if you were able to get out of being looked at as Negro, color, African American, oh, you would, you know. So the historical causes of the racial wealth gap, enslavement, of course, post-enslavement between 1868 and 1934. This government gave 246 million acres of our land. I see it. I see it on these documents. Gave our land, it's ridiculous. Gave all these acres of our land essentially, basically for free, $20, maybe 100,000 acres for 200 to mostly white Americans, which they were immigrants from Europe, an area close to the size of California and Texas combined. More than 1.5 million white families received land patents. And today, as many as 46 million of their living descendants reap the wealth benefits, approximately one quarter of the adult population of the United States. White wealth creation through government land grants from 1862 to 1976. The federal government transferred massive amounts of land, mostly to white families. Some scholars have named this phase the wagon train phase, after the covered wagon caravans romanticized by the 1950s television shows, which carried white families to seek their fortunes in the West. More information is in there. I'm not going to get into that. General William Tecumseh Sherman's famous 40-acre and a mule field order given in 1865 amounts to 1.3 trillion at 6% interest in today's dollars. Black wealth destruction through racial terror. White wealth creation through mortgage subsidies. What are those? Scholars estimate that the present value of destroyed black property in Tulsa is at least 100 million. Funded by the federal government, state and local officials used eminent domain. I have those documents as well. I feel we were robbed. I don't even feel it. We were robbed. Eminent domain to destroy countless thriving black communities in the name of highway and park construction and urban renewal, erasing generations of accumulated wealth. African American business districts were cleared and never recovered, or were cleaved. Like the cleaver? I thought that was a typo. I think they meant to say cleaved and never recovered. There's a lot of information in here. Negative 2% of subsidized new housing went to non-white families from 1934 to 1962, which is true. My grandmother had to work like she couldn't even be home. Black wealth destruction through disenfranchisement and land theft. Housing segregation, chapter 5. Black farmers were pushed off their land. Even if a black farmer received a loan, agency administrators would seek to get rid of them by luring them into debt and then foreclosing and auctioning off their machinery. Land ownership, black farmers in 1910, black farmers owned. My dad was born 16 million acres of land. In 2070, there's an 80%, 2007, excuse me. 2007, there's an 80% loss. They now own only 3.2 million acres. And there was just something on the news about a black farmer having some issues somewhere down there in the South. Mass incarceration creates a vicious cycle. Studies have shown that lower wealth increases the likelihood of incarceration. So there you go. Why have equal wages when you need this vicious cycle of lower wealth creates? Incarceration decreases the ability to build or maintain wealth. This is why they try to get us before we're 18 in the system, the criminal system, that is. Black wealth destruction through mass incarceration. Once released, criminal convictions make it harder for returning citizens to find and maintain jobs, find leases, and be approved for mortgages. How convenient. Exclusion and discrimination in government benefits. Historically, federal policy decisions dealing with welfare, work, and war excluded or discriminated against the vast majority of African Americans. Historically, federal policy decisions dealing with welfare, work, and war in the 1930s and 40s excluded or discriminated against the vast majority of African Americans. The exclusion and discrimination continued due to congressional representatives elected. Thank you, citizens. You elect these people that do this stuff over and over for from southern states that created barriers to African Americans voting. Sounds familiar? Social Security passed and signed by President Roosevelt in 1935 left out most African Americans, and scholars have argued that it was characterized by a form of policy apartheid for the first quarter century of its existence. We've got images. Getty images. Cool glasses, sis. Okay. I see y'all. Hey, Bookie. I see y'all. They was out there. It looked hot, too. And it's not just us. We're always fighting for everybody. So where's this? Protesters at the landmark civil rights demonstration, the March on Washington, 1963. My mom was 1 year old, or she was some months. Cool. Oh, got a lot of images in this one. Woo. During the COVID-19 pandemic, most households received several checks from the government. These payments were likely crucial to help households that lost jobs. Of course it was. Labor market discrimination. College, this is the part that hit me the hardest the first time I heard it. I'm a little more numb to it now because I get it. It makes sense. I just really never thought about it. And then talking to some of my loved ones who have, been on their collegiate journey, and, it's really important that we know these things. Because it comes to a point where if you're just joining in, you're compliant with whatever happens. Even if you waste your entire life, you're becoming compliant because this is like we're doing it. We're going along not knowing. College degrees do little to close the racial wealth gap. For example, college educated African American households have 30 to 33% less wealth at the median than non college educated white households. Average wealth for white Americans in this category is $180,500, while the African American average is $23,400. Now I remember with my earlier working days, we could never talk about our wages. You would like get in real trouble. Interesting. Education, segregation, and debt, discrimination in banking. Scholars estimate that 40% of the black white income gap is due to labor discrimination. As a result, by the mid 1980s, white workers gained in 1.6 trillion at the expense of black workers. In 1865, we're going for the Freedmen's Bank and Trust Company, also known as the Freedmen's Savings Bank, seeding the bank with unclaimed deposits from the free labor and military banks. The initial charter designated an all white board of trustees with broad discretion to oversee the bank and intended to hold only the deposits of the survivors of enslavement and their descendants. Despite this nominal limitation, the bank welcomed customers of all races, and regardless of whether they were formerly enslaved, though formerly enslaved people made up the vast majority of the customers. I'm almost positive that was to cover some Indian tribes. And though the charter made clear that its purpose was to invest the deposits in low risk treasury notes and conservative US securities, it vaguely stated that a third of the deposit, called available funds, could be invested anywhere, leaving a clear open for abuse. The Freedmen's Bank used a number of aggressive methods and tactics to solicit deposits and to convince black patrons that their money was safe and they could grow wealth. But the bank turned quickly from a savings bank to a risky private investment bank controlled by a small minority of trustees. Against the bank's original congressional charter and without the knowledge of the black customers, who were largely unable to secure loans from the bank invested the money in risky railroad real estate holdings to benefit who? Business owners and bank managers. June 29, 1874, the bank failed and closed due to fraud. One study estimated the average amount owed to depositors across 71 failures of federally chartered banks between 1865 to 1933. The Freedmen's Savings Bank ranked third for the largest amount owed to the depositors at the time of the failure. At this time, African Americans lost their money and they also lost their trust in the federal government and the banks in general. Bank officials at the government chartered Freedmen's Bank improperly invested the savings of newly freed enslaved people, leading to the loss of approximately 2.9 million or 63 million in 2017 dollars. This loss of wealth devastated newly freed enslaved people and their descendants for generations. Before the Great Depression, there were 130 black-owned banks. Today, there are only 21. We've got images. Are these prisoners? Yeah. Incarcerated firefighters from Eel River Conservation Camp continue to tackle the Caldor Fire as the fire footprint continues to expand southwest of the Lake Tahoe Basin. August 2021, the 27th. I be wondering what's under that land when it starts these fires and all of these accidents and stuff. I know it's bodies under there. I'm not gonna start my mess though. California unemployment insurance March to June 2020. Weekly benefit amounts. There's a difference. Which it would have to be different if everyone is being paid differently. You know, the numbers aren't going to just become equal when they're not equal to begin with. Generally, white students are twice as likely as black students to receive financial help from their family for higher education. Only 16% of low income black Californian students receive a Cal Grant Award. Drivers of the wealth gap today: unequal home ownership. We've seen, we have seen the ramifications of that. Median equity by race, home values by race. There was a couple of stories that I caught with people like seeing the differences in the value of their homes depending on how the person saw you. Like people love to say race doesn't matter here, but they use it as a tool for damn near everything. So yeah, I wasn't shocked. I'm more shocked of people not really like admitting it more, I would say. 2019 liquid assets amount by race, fewer assets drive the wealth gap. Back to the piggies again. You can see for yourself. They have all types of numbers and calculations and all kinds of stuff in between these images. Go back and check it out yourself. Black business owners typically start their businesses with half the capital of white business owners, despite the fact that they demonstrate a greater need for startup financing. The median loan amount for black business owners who are approved for credit is less than half of the loan amounts extended to their white counterparts. Lower business ownership, ownership by race, 2004, super outdated. It should definitely be a little different now, especially with the after the pandemic. I'm sure there are some updated studies. We've got images. First black owned Amoco. I remember Amoco. Transmission franchise is circa 1970. I remember Amoco. You remember Amoco? I do. During the household crisis in the 2000s, California had the country's highest foreclosure rates, with Los Angeles leading the state. African American household foreclosure rates were 1.9 times that of other Americans due to discriminatory banking policies practices. Effects of the wealth gap: fewer intergenerational wealth transfers. Self explanatory. You can't pass on what you don't have. Between 26 to 50% of an adult's wealth position is directly due to inheritance or gift money. Larger family contributions earlier in life help white families buy better houses and get better mortgages and create better financial security to combat a crisis. It sounds beautiful. No shade. Lower financial resilience during crisis. Although the IRS does not collect race or ethnicity data, recent research indicates that overwhelming amounts of the federal tax benefit goes to white households at all income levels. Interesting. I would say, I don't know, maybe they are collecting the race thing. Well, you don't have to collect the race thing if the the numbers, the math, the money is already fixed. Now that is interesting. How would they know? That's interesting. Discriminatory tax structures. I'm almost positive race is on those documents. Percent of households in Los Angeles that hold some type of liquid asset. Native born black households as opposed to white households, 2014. Conclusion, we got through this whole document, guys. The legacy of slavery continues to reach into the lives of African Americans to date. For hundreds of years, the American government at the federal, state, and local levels has systematically prevented African American communities from building, maintaining, and passing on wealth due to the racial hierarchy established to maintain enslavement, segregation, racial terror, harmful racist neglect, and other atrocities in nearly every sector of civil society have inflicted harms, which cascade over a lifetime and compound over generations. As a result, African Americans today experience a large and persistent wealth gap when compared to white Americans. Addressing this persistent racial wealth gap means undoing long-standing institutional arrangements that have kept African American households from building and growing wealth at the same rate as other households to this present day. Now, that's really the end of the document. Yes, it is. So, the section preliminary recommendations for future deliberation. I believe because this is geared specifically to California, yes, I am going to do this. Tomorrow, I'm coming back to do this. Let me copy and paste this part. Yeah, I want to break some of this part down. Yeah, that was a whole document. That felt good. So what I'm going to do is, tomorrow, I'm going to keep the momentum going. I want to go back to the preliminary. Let me put it in the comments. So I can remember it. That's what we're going to do this tomorrow. So I'm not going to go like all the way through it because a lot of it has to do with California and their bills and wada. But as for like pathologizing the families, I want to go into some of the so-called recommendations for the future deliberations. I want to kind of go over some of those, like the environment, infrastructure, not every chapter, because I see it breaks down recommendations like per chapter. So I just want to go through some of that, pick out a couple of things that I think are important. And I really enjoyed this one here. So this is the end of chapter 13. Tomorrow I will be back at 5:55 p.m. Forgive me with my lazy talking. I had fried me 3 pieces of fish and I'm stuffed. It was so hard to do this today. I have to stop eating before I come to podcast. Peace and love to you. Please be safe and aware. I love you. I'll see you tomorrow.
Social responsibility isn't a deep shift because it's a voluntary tactic, a reaction to a certain market at this point. And as the corporation reads the market differently, it can go back. One day you see Bambi, next day you see Godzilla.
A safe space where facts can be processed for results. Please like, dislike, subscribe.